Dr. Gary, you may start now.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second TRAC Forum in the IGEM 2021 conference. The TRAC Forum, as you know, stands for Transformation, Revolution, Action, and Commitment. And this second forum is focused on clean energy for public transportation. So once again, we welcome everyone this morning, and we hope that you enjoyed this upcoming forum. The global scientific community, ladies and gentlemen, is completely unequivocal about anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions and their impact on climate change. As a matter of fact, the sixth assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, has already published anticipated regional impacts on climate based on both the 1.5 degree as well as the 2-degree increase scenarios. And none of these has good impacts on either the environment, global economy, or social status of humanity around the world. A significant proportion, ladies and gentlemen, of these emissions stems from our need for mobility. Whether it's people or products, mobility remains an important source of greenhouse gas emissions. And today, we are very privileged to hear from three eminent panelists who will be speaking to us on this subject. First of all, Prof. Shawal Hamid Muhammad Ali, who is from the Department of Electrical and Electronic Systems Engineering at University Kebangsaan Malaysia. We'll also hear from Encik Huzaimi Nur Omar, and from the Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Center, and Mr. Naim from the Malaysia Automotive Robotics and Internet of Things Institute, or MARI. So a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. As usual, with a forum like this, we welcome your questions to the panelists. You can direct a question to either all the panelists or an individual panelist. Put your questions in the question box that you will see at the base of your screen. If you don't see it there, refresh your screen and you should be able to see that question box. Please identify yourself and your affiliation if you can, because that will help the panelists to frame the responses more accurately. So without any further delay, let's get to our first speaker. Our first speaker is Associate Professor Shawal Hamid Muhammad Ali from the Department of Electrical, Electronic and Systems Engineering, Faculty of Engineering and Built Environment of University Kebangsaan Malaysia. His research areas specifically include the Internet of Things, systems on a chip, artificial intelligence, embedded systems, as well as hardware and software co-synthesis. Professor Shawal also has in the past participated in projects related to Internet of Things, notably those based on air quality monitoring systems, also automatic food intake monitoring systems, and we're talking about wearable systems, also automatic human emotion recognition systems for automotive drivers. And this is, of course, related to safety, as well as intelligent urban farming systems. So without any delay, Professor Shawal, you may share your screen and begin your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Let me share my screen. Sorry. Okay. Can you see my screen, Gary?
Very clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Assalamualaikum and good morning, everyone. I'm Shawal from the University Kebangsaan Malaysia. And today my topic is about active mobility for smart and sustainable townships. I think as we know, active mobility is one type of transportation, mode of transportation that can help to increase the adoption of using the public transport. And eventually this will help to achieve a sustainable living. Okay, I will explain on how active mobility can help to increase the adoption of public transport later. I will divide my talk into three parts. Okay, in the first part, I will start with a brief introduction on climate change. I think when we talk about sustainable, we cannot avoid talking about climate change. The reason why we are going towards a sustainable environment is because we want to overcome the issues or the impact of climate change. But I believe most of us here, we are aware about the issues of climate change. Yeah? And in part two, I will talk about the mitigation approach. How can we mitigate the impact of climate change? And I will use active mobility as one of the approaches to reduce the impact. And finally, on part three, I will give a few case studies on active mobility, the implementation in few countries. Okay, let's start with the first part, which is the climate change. I will start with some scenario related to climate change issues. In 2016, 722 weather and disaster events. This is 3 times more than what happened in 1980. And we are facing 20% of species extinction, and this could increase to 50% of extinction in 2100. And even if all countries keep the Paris pledges, okay, as you know that in 2015 we have signed the Paris Agreement to reduce the carbon emission, for example, the average temperature still likely to increase by 3 degrees Celsius in 2100. Okay, it shows that the climate change issues are worsening. Okay, so we need to do something in order to overcome or to mitigate this impact. One of the examples of climate change is global warming. Okay, how this can happen? How global warming happens? Okay, basically human activities through urbanization increase the greenhouse gases emission to the air, and these greenhouse gases trap the heat, and then when these gases trap the heat, okay, this will increase the temperature, and this is how we got high temperature or the global warming issues. Okay, basically it starts from the process of urbanization. Yeah? And let's see some of the impact of this global warming. If you can see from the slide, okay, if you look at the picture on the left, okay, this picture shows the Arctic sea ice in 1984, and in 2012 you can see how the ice has melted. Yeah, so you can see the area covered with ice is lesser compared to 1984. And this is another disaster. Okay, this is in Cambodia, and if you can see the picture on the left is the Mekong River. This was before the Typhoon Nari in May 2013, and after Typhoon Nari in October 2013, you can see that the flood. Okay, the areas has been flooded. Okay, and this disaster has affected more than 500,000 people. Okay. And this slide shows the urbanization activities. Okay, and for example, this is from Manila. Okay, you can see the difference between the dense of population or the level of urbanization. The picture on the left is in 1989, and then the picture on the right is in 2012. Okay, so I think the urbanization happened everywhere in the world. Okay, even in Malaysia. So from all this discussion, we can say that 95% of climate scientists agree that climate warming, the trend of global warming, are extremely likely due to the human activities. Basically, human activities through the urbanization increase the level of gas emissions to the air, and eventually this will increase the temperature, and this will lead to the climate change and also some disasters. Yeah. So what is the solutions? Okay, we can try to mitigate the issue. Okay, how to mitigate? By reducing the impact of climate change, by reducing the flow of heat trapping gases, by reducing the gas emissions to the air. Or we can try to adapt our life to the climate change. to adapt to this kind of disasters. But I will discuss on the mitigation aspect. I think it is better for us to mitigate the impact of climate change. Now, this brings us to the part 2, okay, which is the mitigation approach. And one of the approaches that we can use is the active mobility. Active mobility is a regular physical activity undertaken as a means of transport. So basically, any transportation with physical activity that do not use motorized system is known as active mobility. The picture here shows the electric bike. This is e-bike or electric bike. This is also can be considered as active mobility, okay, because it has pedal. So even though it is a motorized bike, but because of the pedal, you can still doing your physical activities. Yeah? On the other hand, e-scooter is not considered as active mobility because e-scooter is totally motorized vehicle. Okay, so but basically the e-scooter or even this pedal-assisted bike or even the normal bike can be considered as micro-mobility. Okay, and the use of micro-mobility is very important if we want to reduce the impact of climate change, or even if you want to reduce a few of the other problems. Yeah? Now, let's talk about the benefit of physical activities. Okay, number one, through these physical activities, through the cycling or walking, okay, walking is also considered as active mobility. Okay, walking, yeah. We will obviously we will have health benefits. Okay, active mobility through walking and cycling can mitigate some of the health issues, especially faced by Malaysia. As we know, Malaysia is known with the highest number of obesity people in Asia. Okay, so with this active mobility, we can reduce this statistic. Okay, other than that, we can reduce the air pollution, reduce the mental stress due to the traffic jam when you drive. Okay, this traffic jam and the congestion can lead to mental stress. Okay, and active mobility can also reduce the carbon emissions, and also finally it can encourage to shift people towards public transportation. Okay, I will explain later how active mobility can be used to encourage or to promote the use of public transportation. Yeah? Okay, one of the major opportunities presented by active mobility is the ability to fill the first and last mile gap. Okay, so this is how active mobility, for example, walking and cycling, can help to promote or to encourage people to use the public transport. E-bike can cover longer distances, so making them more practical for first and last mile transportation. So basically, you can imagine that first and last mile are the shortest distance to the main transport services or to your final destination. The biggest issue of public transport is the problem of first and last mile transportation. If we don't have this, it will discourage people from using the public transport. I believe you can imagine, let's say if you want to go to your office, okay, if you want to use the train, for example, and you have to drive your car from your house to the train station and park your car and then you get on the train, okay? But sometimes when you are driving, you can say, you will think that, okay, might as well you go straight away to the office with your car. And then you, after thinking that the hassle to find the parking place at the train station, so perhaps you might decide not to use the public transport anymore. So with the active mobility, this can be avoided. Yeah? Other than that, okay, the active mobility can also replace the car trips. Car trips mean short trips that we make to go from one building to another. For example, from one office to another office, or from one office, from office to the mall, or from one mall to another mall. Okay, so in most countries, at least 35% of the trips in the urban, okay, is under 5 kilometers. With normal bicycle, it takes about 20 minutes to cover this about a 5 kilometer radius. And around 50% of trips in the urban less than 10 kilometers. If you use electric bike for a 10 kilometer ride, you will take around 20 to 25 minutes on e-bike. So you can see that Using active mobility, for example, the e-bike can be used to replace the car trips. So we don't use car in the urban cities or in the urban area to move from one building to another building. So if you want, okay, what need to be done? If you want to introduce or if you want to have this active mobility or to promote active mobility and making the cities to become bikeable and walkable. Number one, okay, cities and townships should be designed to support cycling and walking instead of prioritizing cars. Number two, the system should be convenient and efficient. A convenient and efficient infrastructure with well-connected footpaths and lanes that can be connected that can be connected to the public transit or public transport that is needed. Yeah. Number three, dedicated space for all. So we must build a cycling network infrastructure to encourage the adoption of active mobility. We have to make the environment for active mobility comfortable. Okay, we have to make it comfortable, especially in tropical climate countries like Malaysia. Large trees can be made as shade, and we can also prepare a shaded footpath and etc. etc. Okay, I will show some case studies later. And then we can use technology. Okay, we can use technology to improve and to make the active mobility safer and convenient. For example, sensors and AI can be used to issue an alert on improper parking or overcrowding bikes or improper usage of the bike, etc. So the use of technology can help, can make the system more convenient. Okay, now let's go to the part 3. Okay, I will show some case studies. Okay, this case studies from few countries, and I also will show one of the plan or one of the project being done in UKM. Yeah? Okay, let's look at Seoul. Okay, Seoul in Korea. Okay, they have a transport vision 2030. Yeah, this picture shows the congestion. Actually, the congestion in one of the streets in Seoul in 2007. Okay, so the vision 2030 is to make livable Seoul without relying on cars. Okay, so they are going to promote walking and cycling. They are going to improve the streets. Okay, they are going to secure the mobility for transportation vulnerable. Okay, and they will increase the sharing, the bike sharing, the system, the shared bike platform. And also, they will also go towards this environment to encourage rational use of cars and so on. So basically, if they continue with this plan, they are targeting to reduce some of the data, some of the statistics. Okay? For example, reduction in the number of reduction in number of car trips by 30%. As I mentioned earlier, car trips means the short distance that we travel in the urban area. Okay, so they are targeting to reduce the car trips by 30%. Okay, to reduce the transit commute travel time by 30%. Transit commute time also the transit time you move from one place to another place in the city. Yeah, and also to increase the green space by 30%, and some other target that they have stated for their vision 2030. Okay, in some of their implementations, you can see that there is a wider pathways or sidewalks. Okay, you can see the picture on the right, very wide sidewalk for the people to walk. And then if you look at the picture on the left, this is the transport. Okay, here on this street, only the transport like this bus transit, cycle and walking is allowed. Okay, no cars is allowed in this on this street. Yeah. Now let's look at Taipei. Okay, so this is Taipei. Taipei has a vision. They call it building a cycling city. Okay, this picture shows the congestion in 2006. Okay, and you can see that with their vision. Okay, so the Taipei city government they launched a public bicycle sharing scheme. They call it U-Bike. Okay, U-Bike in 2009 to promote cycling among its residents. You can see the pictures how the people of Taipei they cycle. on their cities and so on. Okay, then the third case study, this is one project that we have done. We have started actually in UKM. We call it Smart and Sustainable Mobility System towards a low carbon campus. Okay, actually we started this project in 2019. The idea is to reduce the carbon emission by 10%. Okay, and this can be done through the smart parking and also the electric bike transportation system. Okay, we have this is the project implementation area. We have selected some areas as a case study for the smart parking and smart electric bike transportation. So this is where we want to deploy the e-bike so that people from one building or from one block to another block, they can use this electric bike to move, right, rather than using the cars. So this is akin to the reducing the car trips. And the system comes with we have this air quality sensor to monitor the air quality, because we want to make sure that this project will reduce the carbon emission. Okay, the smart parking side where the residents can park their car, and then we have this e-bike system where people can use the electric bike, and everything is connected to the cloud. Connected to the cloud, where the people in UKM, the users can monitor through their smartphone or the dashboard display. Yeah. And we use our own developed air quality monitoring system that we call Airbox. Okay, we use this system to monitor the air quality in the area. And with this system, people can also look at the air quality using the dashboard or the mobile application. Okay, we have taken some data in 2018 actually. This is the data for carbon emission in between 1st May 2018 until 21st May 2018. Okay, but as I said, we started this project in 2019, but towards the end, we have delayed the project, and then during the MCO, we cannot continue this implementation yet, so we have suspended this project due to the MCO, and we are hoping to start back this project after once people can go back to the campus. Okay, and this is just a concept. Okay, and then this is another example. This is just a concept. This example of concept is just to show how the active mobility can be used for first and last mile transportation. In this example, the distance, I just use my house as example. Yeah, the distance from my house to the Bandar Sri Putra town is around 3.5 kilometers. Okay, and with e-bike, you will take 8 minutes to 10 minutes for e-bike. But right now, people in my place, for example, we use car. Okay, we use car to go to the town center. All right, and if we have e-bike, actually it's better to use active mobility like e-bike to go to the town center. And the picture on the right shows the distance between my house to the nearest train station, the commuter station, okay, which is around 6.2 kilometers. And with e-bike, it will take 40 minutes to 80 minutes to arrive. Yeah? And okay, again, this is the Bandar Sri Putra township. Imagine that if currently, okay, the picture on the left is the current situation. Okay, and this is a quite busy street, yeah, quite congested, especially during the peak hours. Okay, just imagine if this area, okay, if we ban cars from going inside this area, we put a roof at the top as for the shaded. Okay, the picture on the, sorry for the my lousy drawing. Okay, I'm not that good at drawing. For example, this green is the roof. Okay, and then the bottom is the pathway, where people can just walk on the street. Okay, so no cars is allowed to go in here. Those who are coming with cars, they can park somewhere else. We can prepare a dedicated parking area, but they have to walk to this, the high street area. But the idea is to promote people to use active mobility, to use the electric bike to come to this area, park, and then they can walk in this area. Okay. So actually, this is something that I want to work on. I want to use this as an example of how active mobility implementation, okay, can be done. But obviously, this requires a collaborative effort from various government agencies, private sectors, authorities, and other stakeholders if we want to do this. Okay. So with this slide, we have reached the end of my talk. Okay. Thank you everyone for listening. And I believe I will answer the questions during the Q&A session. And you can also contact me for any inquiries. Okay, thank you again. Back to you, Gary.
Thank you so much, Professor Sawal. Very comprehensive presentation covering all the issues from basically need for connectivity all the way to some very interesting case studies and some what ifs if we could convert some of our cities for active mobility and derive all the benefits therefrom. So I believe that there should be questions for Prof. Sawal. Kindly once again feel free to put them in the question and answer box. We'll take them at the end of all the presentations during the panel discussion. Moving on to our second panelist for this morning's TRAC forum, we have with us MGTC's own Huzaimi Noor Omar. Received his bachelor's degree in engineering from Vanderbilt University in the USA and is currently Senior Director of the Low Carbon Mobility Group, a group under MGTC. MGTC is itself an organization mandated to champion green economy in Malaysia and responsible to establish, maintain, execute, and enhance policies, processes, and procedures related to low carbon mobility. Encik Huzaimi has more than 14 years of experience in the fields of automotive and electric vehicle engineering, and in 2016 was assigned to expand the charging station infrastructure in Malaysia. The installation of public access EV charging stations under the project Driving Efficient Electricity Demand Growth Through Electric Mobility, funded by the Malaysian Electricity Supply Industry Trust Account, MSITA, to improve energy efficiency through increasing demand of electricity for EV charging. Under this fund, this program, 235 public charging stations have been successfully installed. Encik Huzaimi, please begin your presentation. You can share your screen and your slides now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. De Gary, for the kind introduction. Hi, everybody. My name is Huzaimi Noor bin Omar. So, from MGTC, and this is the area that we have been working on, especially on the low carbon mobility. I also have to thank our previous presenter, Associate Professor Sawal from UKM, as he had kindly give us quite a detailed explanation on the climate change and also the global warming, which result into my presentation will be fairly shorter than the first presenter, I presume. Yeah. So in this session, I will briefly introduce about the initiative that we are working on, which is coming out with a blueprint for the land transport in Malaysia. It is called Low Carbon Mobility Blueprint. And then on the later part of the session, I will talk a bit more on the electrification, mainly on the electric bus and the choice of the energy. Yeah. Move to the next, please. So this low carbon mobility blueprint is a document that a lot of us within the audience probably had been involved, because we had been having numerous stakeholders engagement to come out with these recommendations under this low carbon mobility blueprint. It is a bit overdue since it's like we have to repeat some of the process on getting this document to be approved at the cabinet level. But we are optimistic that this document can be approved and ready within this year, inshallah. So this low carbon mobility blueprint have a lot of a relationship with the Environmental Quality Act 1974, which is the act that is owned by our ministry, Kementerian Alam Sekitar dan Air, and also have a strong linkage to the National Transport Policy by MOT as well. Yeah, thanks. Next, please. Why we are looking into the land transport sector on the broad picture that Prof. Sawal had given us earlier. So I'm taking a bit on the lower tier of the information. So we are looking into the sectoral GHG emission, in Malaysia in terms of like the GHG inventory. As one of the year being captured over here is under our third national communication and second biennial update report to UNFCCC back in 2018. So the report is stating that transport is actually the second largest emitter for Malaysia, which energy industry is the highest. And then you can see around the pie chart there. So in relative to other sector, these two sectors is like hugely contributing to our GHG. So that is relatable to the climate change and also global warming that we are actually contributing as a country. So we need to address this area. We look a bit deeper into the transportation sectors. So the first finding, we found that the road transport is actually the major contributor within the transport sector itself. So in short, we have like three key subsectors from there. It's a land and maritime, also aviations. So you see out of the 20%, 18% is on the road transport itself. Hence, that is why our blueprint is focusing on the land transports as the first step that we are taking onto addressing the GHG emission on the transport sector in Malaysia. So diving in a bit deeper from there, on the right side of the pie chart, you can see I highlighted a few in yellow, which is like the key contributor. The first contributor is coming from the car segment. And then looking at on the opposite side, you will see like the bus, cumulatively, it takes about 4.8% of the emission coming from the land transport, and also rail is 0.34%. So these two sector, bus and rail combined, is what make up to the most of the public transport. And relative to the amount of populations that we have and all that, you see like the contributor is actually coming from these private vehicles, which is a passenger car. So from here, it gives us some ideas and sense of direction of where shall we drive this initiative or these recommendations. So I think from here it's quite clear that we can say it's like we need to shift people from car, from privately owned car to the public transport is one of the key measures. So the total outcome that was expected would be like a lower on the overall perspective. Of course, if we tied up with active mobility as Prof. Shawal is proposing earlier, that will make the situation even better. And we see a very, very strong correlation between active mobility and public transport uptake as well. Okay, next. And these are like the overview of the low carbon mobility blueprint that we are working on. The goal is realizing low carbon mobility for the land transport sector through reducing greenhouse gas emission energy consumption by 2030. So the timeline for the LCMB or low carbon mobility blueprint is until 2030. There are 6 implementation frameworks. This is quite a common frameworks for most of the policy initiative. But most importantly, we are dividing the focus into 4 focus areas, which is improving vehicle energy efficiency, electric mobility adoption, alternative fuel adoption, and also mode shift. Today, based on the topic that we are discussing, so the center of the discussion is mostly at the focus area C, it's the alternative fuel adoption, which we are looking at the electricity as quote unquote is the one of the alternative energy for to drive the public transports. Of course, more measures has been invested towards the electric mobility, but there are some other choices or some other option that we can pursue. So in relation to like a mode shift itself, there are a lot of other elements into it, including like the number of the vehicles itself, how the land is being used, the land use, the traffic flow, and the active and micro mobility, and also the rail transports. So these are the kind of like the snapshot of what the LCMB is all about. On the electrification itself, so we are focusing on 3 different areas, which is the passenger vehicles, buses, and also motorcycles. For the goods vehicles, different strategy is being looked at, mostly on the biodiesel and some alternative fuel. Yeah. Okay, next. This is actually coming from the analysis that were made by our technical consultant, which is TSSM, Transport Science Society of Malaysia. So here I'm putting out two graphical data on what are the difference on the emission comparison based on the past technology on the left hand side. So this is like the one of the steps that we can take on reducing the carbon emission for the public transport, especially for the bus, is by shifting it towards the cleaner technology. So the cleaner technology here that we can see is in here, diesel being I would say like the most polluting in this perspective. NGV can reduce quite significantly as well, but electric bus is one of the key choice of the technology over here. Why the color is being shaded quite differently in there? Because I would like to emphasize that this is coming from the upstream, and then we have to understand that this emission is quite dependent on the grid. So what we are seeing here is actually based on our grid status. So this is based on the actual scenario. Can you point the cursor to the electricity bus there? Atas sikit kanan. That's right. So the same bus, if it is being driven in different area with a cleaner grid, so you will see like the bar will be reduced. So we take kind of like the example, if the same bus is being driven in Kuching, for instance, which they are quite adamant on going into the zero emission vehicles as well. So their emission factor, the grid emission factor in Sarawak is almost half of what we have in Peninsular Malaysia. So the impact on the electric bus in usage in Sarawak, for instance, is half of what we see on the screen as well. And if we opt for renewable energy options, so that upstream emission can be like totally eliminated, and then we're gonna get a true zero emission situations. The bar chart on the right is showing on the perspective of per passenger kilometer comparison. The cluster on the left within the graph is showing on the passenger vehicles mostly, and for the passenger vehicles in Malaysia, we have a lot of them in terms of numbers. It take about 47% of our total vehicle inventory in Malaysia. High ownership rate, and then we in Malaysia loves car, and then based on the finding, the vehicle occupancy rate for passenger vehicle in Malaysia is quite low. It's only at 1.2 person per vehicle. So this what we are looking at for the passenger vehicles is representing 1.2 person in a vehicles. So this is how we do the comparison on the emission per passenger kilometer. But for the bus can take up to maybe 40 passenger, and then although per kilometer on the vehicle basis is logically is higher, but the usage is being spread out to a lot more occupancy, and that is that will result into much lower emission per passenger kilometer. But nevertheless, it is also very important for us to make sure that the ridership or the uptake is at certain level. If the bus is running empty most of the time, it's not good for the people, it's not good for the country, it's not good for the organizations, because it's just crowd the roads, and then the opportunity to reduce the emission via choosing the public transport rather than private vehicles is lost. Yeah. So similar approach as well. If we are looking into like the place with a lower grid emissions factor, or using the renewable energy, the one that you see in like a pinkish color bar, or the upstream emission coming from electricity generation, can be totally eliminated. We are also looking at the fuel cell vehicles. Right now, the consideration, what we are seeing over here is based on the green hydrogens. The green hydrogens is very much dependent on the electricity production as well. And although it look a bit high over there, but if you can find a solution of using the RE, renewable energy, as a source, so that can be totally eliminated as well. Okay, next. Here, this is following a few slides. I'm just showing some of this clean public transport initiative that had been took place in Malaysia. So this is not a new thing to Malaysia actually. So we had we already observed this initiative being started from way back in 2015, where you see these electric bus services in Subang, for Subang and Sunway resident. And I believe like the operation is still persists there. I'm just have not been seeing that the expansion has been fully taken up, and right now we are looking onto these particular areas through our national electric bus roadmap study that we are conducting to see how do we actually accelerate the uptake or learning from what had been implemented in the past. The response from the user was quite good, as we had conducted some survey on that particular subject, but nevertheless it has not been growing as what we expected, especially on the particular locations. On the same year, we also observed Malacca also looking into the initiative. Their trial on the electric bus in Malacca as well, run by Panorama Malacca, one of the state subsidiary, I believe. And there will fund that is being allocated about 70 million ringgit called Sustainable Mobility Fund. It's put up on the SME Bank to help to accelerate this initiative. Yeah, next. We also lucky to see that they were initiative from local company on developing our own electric bus. On my personal level, I would really like to see that this is actually heading to the right direction. The photo that you see on the left side is took from the article, the one that is being shown in the slide there. So this is actually claimed as a locally designed electric bus, and this is one of the prototype that had produced. It has been published, been showcased in iGEM platform on that year, and then yeah, we hope that there will be like enough supports to actually to bring this to the full scale commercial level. At the same time, we're also seeing this electric bus in Putrajaya. So this is under the program with NEDU, the Japanese counterpart, that looking at 10 units of the trial electric bus in Putrajaya that feature, what do you call that, pantograph charging, which is the approach for the technical strategy for this electric bus is using supercharging. It doesn't require people to handle it, so it is done via overhead pantograph. And yeah, so it's the trial, I think, still going on, and the latest that I heard from Putrajaya is that they are moving up to the next phase already with the trial that will showcase the double-decker bus. Yeah, next. We are also seeing the initiative being taken up by TNB through the Tenaga National University. So there were 2 buses being procured and being used as a shuttle and as a shuttle bus for the campus. 2020 budget, we heard of the government plan to spend 450 million ringgit on the electric bus program. And this is something that we are looking at as well in terms of like learn from what is the cost of the fund not being disbursed at the year, and the findings so far that it has a lot to do with our COVID situations. That's kind of like come in time with this initiative. Yeah. Next one. Lately, we have been seeing or observing a very interesting revolution on this Clean Public Transport Initiative in Malaysia as well. So the one on the left is this ART. They called it the ART. It's articulate bus, electric bus that can run autonomously. So I'm still looking for photos without the driver. As you can see, there's a driver there, but he's not exactly holding on the steering wheel. So this ART could actually run autonomously. So in terms of the autonomous vehicles, we see that as one of the optimization strategy that can be included in the technical strategy on optimizing the use of the energy and reducing the emissions. Yeah. And then at the same time, now we are seeing also in Kuching, the trial has begun with the hydrogen bus. So this is quite interesting. Under Sarawak Energy Berhad, I believe they have this manufacturing facility and also hydrogen dispensing facility that is being used by this pilot program in Sarawak. So we hope to get more information about this to kind of like see where we are going with this technology, whether it can be a promising technology for Malaysia or not. So far, it's only Sarawak that's having the data and then the program. So we are working with Sarawak on this matter. Okay, next. This is the last slide that I have for today. So the clean energy consideration for the public transport, I can divide it to 3. This is on Malaysia perspective, especially for the transport. One is the clean electricity. So this is important to mention clean electricity, which is I dividing it into like 3 areas. First is the low emission factor grid obtained by a higher share of RE and efficient power plant. So this is important because the electrification cannot really work if our grid is dirty or reach certain threshold that making like the net emission is worse off. So far, based on the assessment analysis that we made, Malaysia is still in a good position for implementation of electric vehicles. Next is the RE-based electricity generations. We are seeing this initiative being enhanced by recent announcement from the Energy Ministry, KETSA, and the transportation sectors that they're planning to use the electricity as one of the key energy source. It will be benefited. If you recall the bar graph that that I showed you earlier, with more RE coming in, the situation will only get better. And the last one on this clean electricity is electricity with renewable energy certificate. We are looking into like how best can we make use of this, because if you want to have like a off-grid setup for all the need for the transport, electricity for the transport is going to be very, very costly, might not be very viable, but we are looking into this as one of the sources. So the idea is like pay for the premium for that, and at the same time you help for the RE to also expand in Malaysia. The second energy or fuel consideration is the biofuel. We have a lot of biofuel initiative, especially on the biodiesel and also the biogas. In our case in Malaysia, biodiesel is one of the areas that we are pursuing critically. One of the key critical areas that we need to resolve is the FAME ready for the vehicle itself, because of the acidity property that the biodiesel have. So this is being taken up by the respective OEM. That's why we are seeing like a gradual increase of the biodiesel blend in Malaysia from B5, B7, B10, B20, and so forth. So this is being worked on stages, and we are working on to like how best can we increase the percentage blend and then gain more benefit environmentally on this one. On the biofuel or the biodiesel, the tailpipe emission is still there, potentially sustainable. That's one of the key traits. And definitely it requires good practices throughout the value chain, especially on how do we manage the plantations and on how do we manage the processing of the entire value chain. The last considerations, which is actually very, very promising for Malaysia as well, is looking into the green hydrogen. So on the hydrogen perspective, there are different colors of the hydrogen depending how it's being manufactured. Green hydrogen simply refer to the hydrogen that is being produced from green electricity. So it has to be derived from this at least RE-based electricity. And Sarawak is using the photos there is actually taken from the website of Sarawak Energy. So they are utilizing the energy that they're having from the hydro in Sarawak. Okay, and for this hydrogen perspective, Green Tech Malaysia together with MOSTI is looking onto developing this hydrogen economy and technology roadmap that possibly will give us the clearer picture of how we're going to pursue this technology in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Encik Huzaimi, for a presentation that dovetailed very nicely with Prof. Sawal's in terms of what to do about the middle miles between the first mile and the last mile, and highlighting for us some of the cleaner fuels that can be used to drive this revolution in public transportation. So once again, key focus on the importance of connectivity and the infrastructure needed to make sure that this kind of connectivity can be achieved with the minimum amount of emissions. Once again, pointing out that the electricity supply from the grid is still vital for reducing emissions in the mobility sector. Moving on to our third panelist for this morning, this third presentation will be made by Mr. Naim Husni Latif. He's a manager in the Strategic Policy Development Division of the Malaysian Automotive Robotics and Internet of Things Institute, known as MARI. MARI was previously known as the Malaysian Automotive Institute, or MAI. MARI is the focal point coordinating center as well as a think tank geared towards enhancing the competitiveness of the automotive industry and overall mobility. And they intend to do this through the adoption of robotics and the Internet of Things. MARI is under the custodianship of the Ministry of International Trade and Industry, MITI, and has recently expanded its scope to cater for the ever-increasing demands for robotics and Internet of Things adoption in Malaysia. Some of the existing initiatives at MARI, the facilities, programs, as well as the experience within the MARI network allow immediate access for industry players to develop their capabilities in advanced manufacturing and advanced IT towards Industry 4.0 compliance. Mr. Naim has a BSc, Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering, specializing in automotive engineering from University Technical Malaysia, Malacca or UTEM, and has an MBA from University Technology, Mara. Mr. Naim, the floor is yours. You may begin sharing your slides and making your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Mr. Gary. And a very good morning and Assalamualaikum to all. And I would like to share my screen. Can you see my screen now, Gary?
Yes, we see it.
All right. Thank you very much. So again, good morning and Assalamualaikum to everyone. So today I'll be representing Dato' Madani Sari from Malaysia Automotive Robotics and IoT Institute, MARI. And the previous two presentations by Prof. Sawal and also Mr. Huzaimi is there's a lot of information that is also in my presentation. So it might be that this is just additional information to you guys, but let's start with the first one for my presentation. So in my content of presentation, I will be introducing what is National Automotive Policy, NEP 2020, whereby I think most of you have known this is the policy under Ministry of International Trade and Industry. And also MARI is one of the agency under MITI. And at the second content of my presentation will be the initiatives by MARI itself in terms of the environmental protections and whatnot. So the first presentation will be the National Automotive Policy 2020, NEP 2020. And as you guys know, the previous NEP 2014, we are very focusing on environmental, which as the earlier two presentation, they have notified and they have told you that the previous, we target on less carbon emissions and we would like to have a better and clean energy. And in terms of NEP 2020, we target additional from that particular clean energy, which is, as you can see in the left top corner, we have additional of next generation vehicle. And the second one is mobility as a service. And the third one will be the Industrial Revolution IR 4.0. So these three particular elements is actually the inclusion, the additional that we add on in NEP 2020. Of course, also the NEP 2014, whereby the clean and clean for environment, including the transportation sector. And as you can see, there are a lot of components and development of new components, especially on autonomous vehicle, whereby we call it as next generation vehicle. And the next would be mobility as a service. As you guys know, there's a lot of services that is having around in our country in terms of mobility, whereby this particular services is based on internet connections and making life easier. And the third one will be the Industrial Revolution IR 4.0, whereby that is actually, there's a lot of things that you can check in terms of the AI and AI, VR, in terms of the smart manufacturing processes. So when we conclude everything in NEP 2014 and the new elements in NEP 2020, we can know that actually we are moving forward towards clean environment and also the integration of IoT. So as you can see, in terms of the lower slides, there is actually the overall what the target of National Automotive Policy is. There is traffic control, there is autonomous vehicles. Of course, the clean environment is also one of the items. So as I was saying, the NEP 2014 framework is the previous NEP. There's also direction and strategies, whereby it consists of investment, technology engineering, market expansion and outreach, supply chain, safety, human capital development. And the new elements, the three elements that I'll be talking about, the next generation vehicle, the Industrial Revolution 4.0, and mobility as a service. And that is the inclusion of NEP 2020, whereby we have more on the connectivity itself, next generation vehicle. It target also on big data and lifestyle. Of course, it does not forget that it is the energy efficient and the reduction of carbon emission, also safety. So the framework of the NEP is supported by these below documents. We have roadmaps, 7 roadmaps, include of the value chain, technology, talent, aftermarket, mobility as a service, robotics, and also IoT. So this is the connected mobility vision, whereby the NEP, as I can tell you in terms of the 3 elements, the additional elements from 2014. And as you can see in terms of the intelligent transportation system, there are a lot of things. It just not covers on the land transportation, but it is covers also in terms of the drone, UAV technology, energy storage management, as the previous Mr. Huzaimi's presentation, battery, electric vehicle, fuel cell, and whatnot. And it inclusive also in terms of smart city and intelligent factory. So for the next generation vehicle, everybody is talking about the autonomous vehicle, whereby in order for us to get to that particular level, we have to know what are the technologies that are embedded into the autonomous vehicles. And before that, there's battery electric vehicles, there are hybrid, and that's why we have this exhaust emission lab. And we are in the planning of next generation vehicle test bed. Of course, in terms of biofuel, better fuel, in terms of the environment, is also one of our roadmap. At the bottom is the Industrial Revolution IR 4.0, including artificial intelligence. There are a lot of new technologies, whereby it includes of autonomous robots, system integrated for factories, augmented reality, AI protocols, including cloud computing, VDA, and also cybersecurity. So this is actually the NEP 2020 framework. And when we talk about the framework, there is also activities that is done by MARI. And these are the activities that we are doing in terms of green transportation, including the public sectors. So the first thing is, I think you guys might have heard of energy efficient vehicles, whereby EEV is actually defined as a vehicles that met a set definite specification in terms of the carbon emission level and fuel consumption. So we do the testing in laboratory according to the international standards, whereby it also includes the internal combustion engines, whereby the vehicles of internal combustion engines or electric vehicles or hybrid or fuel cell or any kind of engine vehicles can be tested to the same testing international standards of United Nations Regulation number R83 for the exhaust emission and United Nations Regulations number 101 for fuel consumption. So after the testing in laboratory, we will get the numbers and values at the end of carbon emission gram per kilometer and also the fuel consumption of liter per 100 kilometers. So we have provided before the NEP 2014, the manufacturers who do the testing for the fuel consumption testing, there is a limit they have to follow in order to get the incentive that is provided by MITI. And in 2020, we did ask for Jabatan Standards Malaysia in order to develop Malaysian standards, which is energy efficient vehicles requirement, whereby this is actually a better version of the previous EEV, whereby this includes all of the vehicles categories L, M, and N, whereby L is for motorcycle, M is for passenger vehicles, including vans, N is for commercial vehicles, including pickup trucks and larger lorries. And electric vehicles, if the electric vehicles is one of the vehicles that would like to enroll in this particular program, it will definitely be energy efficient vehicle because it's already no carbon emission in terms of the vehicles emitted. And we put that diesel engines of Euro 5 and above will be regarded as energy efficient vehicles. There's a reason for it because the requirements in our country right now is diesel engines is Euro 3. And if manufacturers is going towards more stringent limit and they can comply towards a better Euro 5 rather than the actual legal so they can sell. So we will giving them the energy efficient vehicle compliances. So one of the additional added thing in EEV, we would like to add the EEV label, whereby this is targeting two things. First is to give the awareness. We know that we have to give awareness to most of Malaysians in terms of how they perceive the vehicle is actually very good in terms of reducing the carbon emissions in our community. Because the presentation by Prof. Sawal is that you know that the emitted gases by vehicles is actually very dangerous, and if it's more and more carbon emissions emitted from the vehicles, it will be dangerous for Malaysians. So the first element is to give awareness, whereby we have this energy efficient vehicles label. They will be put a sticker inside or outside vehicles of passenger vehicles and also commercial vehicles category. And also the sticker location in terms of motorcycle, it is easily seen. So where do vehicle manufacturers or new companies who would like to test their vehicles to get the energy efficient vehicles? Well, we under MARI, we have National Emission Test Center, which is located in Bukit Runtuh. The thing that NETC can do is actually, this is the most updated exhaust emission testing facility in ASEAN, whereby we can do testing for Euro 60, whereby you can, whenever that you like to export to European, this is the testing facility that you have to go, and you have to undergo a few testings according to the international standards under the EEC directive or the United Nations regulations. So for now, we can do the testing up until 3,500 kilogram for curb weight of vehicle. So in terms of telling the whole world and Malaysians what is well-to-wheel, of course, electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles, there's a question whether this actually better than internal combustion engines, and basically everyone knows. So in order for us to select whether it's hybrid or electric vehicle, there's a calculation from well-to-wheel. What is well-to-wheel is that you have to understand the calculation of energy consumption that is from well to energy storage. How do we get the energy? Either it's from coal, from other sources. So is this particular carbon emission from this particular generation will increase if we use electric vehicles or plug-in hybrid vehicles? So this calculation is needed in order for us to know which is reducing the carbon emissions towards the environment. And MARI has a plan. This is one of the initiatives that we will do in Cyberjaya, which is for in Electric Vehicle Interoperability Center, whereby in this particular center in Cyberjaya, we will be having buildings with EV charging stations. And not just that, we would like to have solar powered buildings and also wireless charging. So this facility is actually in terms of testing vehicles regulations or R&D in terms of if there is a company who would like to test their particular new products according to standards. And we would like to have this facility set up with the most updated regulations and the ISOs and United Nations. And yeah, we know that in terms of the battery management, MARI is also having battery management solutions developed by MARI, whereby we have also battery pack BMS and electric light commercial vehicles. As you can see here, hydrogen technology is one of the initiative that is done by MARI. And as you can see in terms of the below pictures, there's a lot of vehicles that is using hydrogen technology. And this is actually the solution that we work with our companies that is already having this particular technology. And as the previous presentation by Mr. Huzaimi, also you have heard that there is a lot of electric buses and the capabilities of local talents. They can produce this particular electric vehicle starting from scratch. And we have also developed electric bus with our academia partner. And below pictures is the components whereby what most of the components is developed locally. And we have sets of standards to comply with in order to get the particular bus on the roads. So as I said, in terms of the mobility as a service, we know that there's a lot of services that can come around from mobility. So as you can see, the sharing concept or the connected living, telematics, and also e-payment. There's a lot of e-payments in Malaysia, and multimodal transportation. So the initiative that MARI is taken is that we identify these companies, and in order for us to accelerate the scale up towards the collaborations. And if there is any new companies that would like to do collaborations and in terms of getting a new software to get the usage of Malaysians in mobility as a service, MARI is one of the agency that is doing that particular activities. So this is the same as before, as I explained, emission factor from well to wheel. We have to calculate the first one, as you can see, in terms of the power generation, how much carbon emitted from that particular change from energy in order to get the kilowatt. And then the power delivery within the structures, how much losses, how much emitted carbon when you are doing the power delivery from the generators towards the areas of buildings and infrastructure. And then building and infrastructure, it's the buildings, the vehicles. So how much carbon emission has been emitted from that particular area? So each of the areas that are carbon emitted in terms of the activities, and we need to know the actual calculation. So the emission factor and well to wheel is actually the calculation of carbon emission so that we can know which is actually reducing the carbon emission. And MARI also is doing the strategic research. One of it is Malaysia driving cycle. As you know, whenever that original equipment manufacturer or vehicle manufacturer would like to test and make their vehicles to comply to certain international requirements, there is one international requirements whereby this particular international requirements is subdued in European Union driving cycle. So meaning that the testing is based on the driving behavior for European people, the roadside, the curve, the style of driving is for European people. So MARI, with the government industry academia collaboration, we do collect data using our own local vehicles, which is especially locals from Proton and Produa, which is the most numbers vehicles on the road, to represent this Malaysian driving cycle. So we use both of this brand to collect data and to use our three things. First is to use our public roads so that this particular driving cycle is using our roads, the curvature, the traffic lights, the traffic conditions is according to Malaysian cycles. The second thing is actually the driver behavior, how the driving behavior in terms of low speed, medium speed, and high speed. And the third one is actually using the most numbers of vehicles on the road in Malaysia. And all these three elements we use to collect data, and we analyze this particular data. And this methodology is actually recognized by WP29, and it's the same as European Union. So this particular Malaysian driving cycle is published through Malaysian standards, Malaysian standards MS 2722 EEB requirements. So I think that is my presentation. Thank you very much. And over to you, Mr. Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Naim, for your presentation. Also very interesting and covering the new national automotive policy, which once again expands the scope out of pure policy on automotive issues into broader issues of mobility. Before we continue, once again, I'd like to remind the participants this morning that you can direct your questions to any of our panelists this morning, or even more than one of them if you so choose. We already have some questions in. We thank you very much for those questions. We'll get to them very, very shortly. But first of all, a question perhaps to Prof. Sawal. In terms of active mobility, you've already mentioned that climate of Malaysia is one of the factors that might deter Malaysians from taking to the streets and the pedestrian walkways because of issues of discomfort, and you certainly don't want to arrive at your destination dripping with perspiration. But perhaps we'd like to find out, given the fact more and more Malaysians during this COVID-19 period are actually getting out more, do you think that has had an impact on making Malaysians perhaps a little more able to deal with some level of discomfort and some level of perspiration that perhaps they wouldn't have done so in the past?
Yes.
Would like to know your views on that, if that's possible, please.
Okay. Thank you, Gary. You are right in saying that the climate is some kind of deterrent to force people to use active mobility. And when you mention about right now Malaysians, you can see that more and more Malaysians, they are willing to go out for cycling in the afternoon and so on. But one thing that we need to understand, to differentiate between recreational kind of cycle and also active mobility. Actually, there are two different things. Okay, people can do, yes, we can cycle for our health, for recreational, because it's okay for that to be perspired, to have to be sweating all the way. Okay, because that is the purpose. Okay, that's what we want to do. But if you want to cycle to your office, okay, you don't want to be drenched in sweat and so on, right? So that is two big different. And to come to that, yes, the weather, the tropical climate can be the challenging factor for Malaysia, for example. But I can quote one example. Actually, Singapore aims to be the world first tropical cycling city. Actually, they aim to be the world first tropical cycling city. And to be honest, actually there are ways that can be done if you want to promote cycle as the active cycling or walking as part of the active mobility in the country. For example, what we can do is manual cycle. Yes, it's quite difficult if it's a manually cycle or pedal cycle, but with electric bike, okay, it's quite convenient actually. It is not, I mean, I've tried myself to use electric bike to go from to a destination. Okay, I tried to ride for about 3 kilometers by electric bike. To me, I find it comfortable. Okay, but if I have to cycle manually, yes, I think it's going to be difficult. I'll be drenched with sweat and so on. But the first thing, using the electric bike will help. Number two, if we can have these covered pathways for the cycle, for the people to cycle, yeah. So this also will help, okay. And these covered walkways or pathways also will help. I tried to walk, sometime when I go to these shop lots, okay, we tend to walk between the buildings, yeah, between the building, because we try to walk under the shade, right? So if you walk under the shade, you will feel that it's okay. It's nothing wrong to walk in that city as long as there's a cover area. I mean, as long as you are under the shade. So if you have this kind of structure, for example, buildings that can act as the shade, and perhaps we can have these covered pathways or covered walkways, and if we can build, if we can plant big trees, okay, big trees can be planted to be as the shade. I think in Singapore, they are also going towards this, okay? So they are planning to plant big trees to be some kind of shade to encourage people to cycle or to walk more. I hope that this answer your question. This is my opinion on how we can promote the active mobility to the people.
So much, Prof. Sawal. We'll come back to you later, but in the meantime, I'd like you to consider this question, but we'll ask it later. I'll ask it now, but we'll take the response later. Comparing two different systems, a system where, like in many countries, they allow you to bring your active mobility device onto public transport. Maybe, for example, in Germany, the trains have specific cars that allow you to bring not just folding bikes, but full-size bicycles with sometimes trailers and children's trailers and things like that on. Compared with a system, perhaps, where you leave your bike, if it's not even be your bike, and pick up a separate bike at the destination for the last mile. A sort of use what you need concept as opposed to an ownership concept. We'll come back to that question to you later, all right?
Okay, all right,
In the meantime, I'd like to move to a question that we received from Encik Adnan Ehambram, who is with Renew Cell. And his question, I think, is directed probably to Encik Huzaimi. And the question reads as follows: batteries are an important source for clean energy for public transportation. There are various kinds of batteries, of course. They can be either lead acid or lithium. But the question is why don't we encourage the concept of battery swapping as opposed to charging and needing to wait? The idea of this being, of course, that if you brought in battery swapping, it will only take a matter of a few seconds, perhaps, to swap out a battery before a vehicle can continue operating. And the idea would be, of course, to save time, but also it would improve the distance performance on public transportation such as buses. Huzaimi, would you care to field this question?
Yeah, nice question. Thank you, Dr. Gary, for directing the question to me. So this battery swapping, yes, is true. That is one of the way for us to actually to encourage the usage of the electric vehicles. The primary demotivator for the electrification being said is the charging time. So it's still being grouped with the waiting perceptions, but on certain applications, on the waiting perception, it's not really waiting because you just put it there and you do something else and then you come back to it. So of course, this is different from application or the vehicles altogether. So even on this perspective, I have to bring in this perspective of the usage as well. The key trade-off for this battery swapping, I think can be divided into two. One is, of course, the trade-off of the cost. So if we link it to the ownership of the vehicle, so with the battery swapping system, probably it will be possible for the ownership to be done, or you can procure the vehicle without the battery, and battery being the highest cost element of the vehicles, hence the cost of ownership can be reduced substantially. But then that will implicate into like the number of the batteries that need to be standby for the system, for the usage, have to be higher than the number of the vehicles itself, because there's a swappable conditions and they have to be prime and all that. So in terms of the overall cost perspective, there will be increase in the overall cost perspective. And the question will be like how that part of the battery cost is going to be managed. So there is one part of the trade-off. The other trade-off is the charging time. Of course, is for the betterment in maybe on simple thinking perspective, we say. Because to swap the battery, it require the physical arrangement for the bus battery size. You can imagine this is quite big, so it cannot be handled by person. You get to handle by system, some automated system, and of course they will lead into some sort of like a precision even for electrical. For instance, it require for you to park the vehicle precisely depending how the battery is swapping. We've seen how the battery being swapped from the bottom for the vehicles, and for the bus, we've seen it being swapped at the roof of the bus. So that certain level of precision need to be there, and then there will also cost of the infrastructure on enabling the battery swapping system altogether. So this is not as easy, I would say, on just going to the idea. So this element need to be looked at. However, we're seeing a huge potential for the battery swapping for the motorcycle segment, electric motorcycle segment. So this has been hugely successful in Taiwan, at least, where the electric motorcycle approach is being led by this battery swapping. The parameter that we observe for the battery swapping to remove the requirement of having the automated system, so it have to be able to be handled by a person. So the weight and the ergonomic of the battery is being considered into the equation. And we're seeing at least they're having like two types now. The first one is the earlier one is lesser than 10 kilograms. So that is kind of like the limit that they are going with the energy that you can use, or the ability that you can just take the battery out from the motorcycle and go to the station and swap it. And the other approach is half the weight, so they split the battery into two. So that make it more convenience, but you have two batteries to handle instead of one. So this is still like ongoing, progressing. But we think for electric motorcycle at least, the battery swapping is one of the key direction that we are going on to based on that success rate we're having in Taiwan. Hope that answers.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chief Zaimi. I think the answer is quite comprehensive in the sense that it covers everything from the two-wheelers all the way up to buses and perhaps even long-distance transportation for logistics. And glad also that you covered the human element slightly regarding the weight of batteries, 5 kilograms versus 10 kilograms, something that definitely needs consideration. Also linking to Prof. Shawal's statement, I think earlier, apart from the barriers, one of the barriers that we face in active mobility actually is topography. And we often forget, we think about the sun being hot and the need to exert while you're riding. But we need to remember also that commuting riders tend to carry more when they cycle. And if you're a cyclist, you know that every hill is going to make you exert more and make you break out in a sweat. So I think the idea of moving to two-wheel mobility is also very, very interesting. And before we get back to Prof. Shawal with my second question earlier, I'd like to direct the question to Encik Naim. The new regulatory framework, it's under the new automotive policy. Is there any component in this regulatory framework that deals with the energy sources to be used in the transportation sector? Would you be able to address some of that uncertainty? Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for the question, Gary. In terms of the national automotive policy, it is not restricted to the vehicle manufacturer. If you are, for example, we have new inclusions of next generation vehicles, whereby people are talking about the autonomous vehicle. And for now, there is companies, and there is regards to the vehicles. So if the companies that is starting up or they have technologies and expertise, it will not be restricted to only vehicle manufacturers. And there are companies also is coming to Mari and state that they have this particular system and technologies that they develop themselves. So the talents that is actually in Malaysia is actually very good, and it is highly. We are actually getting them and helping out with our research and our activities towards the ministries. Whatever that we have in the National Automotive Policy does not restrict it to only vehicle manufacturers, but also in terms of the development of components. One. Second is in terms of the talent development. As Mr. Huzaimi said, that in terms of battery swapping, the future is looking at the bike battery swapping, because of one of the reason is the talent is actually already in Malaysia. And that's why one of the future expansion towards vehicles, which is motorcycle battery swapping, is readily available due to the market demand and also the expertise. So it is not just restricted to vehicle components and vehicles manufacturers, but most probably it's to all companies, even for startups.
Would it perhaps extend to battery manufacturers and other sort of ancillary support types of manufacturers, including those for swappable stations, battery stations, and the like? Does it extend to that?
Yes. It is actually expanded to that particular areas in terms of battery swapping, new technologies that leads to cleaner energy, cleaner engines. So these particular developments or these particular technologies actually are in the National Automotive Policy as well.
Okay, thank you so much for the clarification. Now coming back to Prof. Shawal on my earlier question regarding some of the competing systems, you might call it, for active mobility. What does the public think, and what do some of the service providers for public transportation, such as Prasarana, think and feel regarding this? Because I know that the public are allowed to bring folding bicycles onto public transportation, but I also note that there are some restrictions in terms of the timing that you can do that, and in some cases the timings actually don't favor the commuter, because what is regarded as peak periods actually prohibit you bringing the bicycle on public transportation during those times. So instead of sort of promoting it, it kind of puts a bit of a damper on people who are interested in commuting. But your views, please.
Yeah, I think as you said, there are two models that you can use. Number one is this has been done by some other European countries where you can carry the bicycles on your public transport, right? And they have a dedicated place, even in the bus. Okay, I've seen that some countries you can also carry the bicycle on your bus, like similar like you're carrying the wheelchair and so on. I think if I'm mistaken, I read a policy in UK, they are going to increase this type of commuters, this type of buses that can be used to carry the bicycle. But as you said, that even in UK, let's say if you were to start with this active mobility concept, okay, changing the infrastructure, changing the public transport landscape, the type of vehicle, the type of buses, or the type of cars, trains that can accommodate more bicycles, I think that is quite difficult. I mean, it will take time, okay, because it requires a big changes. I mean, the Prasarana need to change everything. Perhaps we have to prepare a different kind of infrastructure so that people can carry the bike easily and so on. But I will prefer we start with the second model, where the second model is the bike sharing platform, the bike sharing. Okay, we prepare few places, we put few places with a lot of bikes that people can just share, just book and use the bike to move from his house from one place to another place. Then just leave the bike there. then get on the public transport. Then once they arrive to the destination, they can book another bike to go to their office and so on. So I prefer we start with that model first, just to get the buy-in from the users. Once we have this huge buy-in from the users, then we can go to the second model. But we must remember, either with model 1 or model 2, we need to have the right infrastructure first. I mean, the pass for cycling, the cycling pass, the walking pass, the covered pass, and also the interconnectivity, the connection between the cycling pass to the transport. This need to be prepared so that we can encourage more and more people to use the active mobility. Then once they can use this bike sharing app or the bike sharing system, and when we know more and more people is using that, then slowly we can add the second. We can add the first model where people can carry their own bike if they want to use their own bike. So that is my opinion on that.
Thank you so much, Prof. Moving on to Encik Huzaimi. We just celebrated, I think, World EV Day or something like that. And part of the activities marking this event were, I think, a pledge that was sent out that anyone who's going to buy a new car pledges that next car will be an electric vehicle. At the same time, we also note that hydrogen is another technology which stands to compete with electric vehicles. Noted, of course, that hydrogen vehicle is simply an electric vehicle that's powered by hydrogen instead of a battery. But perhaps you would like to elaborate a little bit on how far Malaysia is heading, how fast we are moving with respect to the ability to use hydrogen for mobility in Malaysia. I think there may be some out there who are interested in this concept. Would you go ahead, please?
Yeah, I think it is a bit hot question, that one, Dr. Gary. So the potential is there, definitely, on the hydrogen usage in Malaysia. That's why right now we are focusing on developing the roadmap with MOSTI on this hydrogen economy and technology roadmap. So why this economy is also being mentioned there, because there is the part that we need to actually understand fully. So in terms of the hydrogen production, as I briefly mentioned during my session earlier, so we are focusing on the green hydrogen production. So the green hydrogen in principle is, in terms of the substance, is similar as a green hydrogen and blue hydrogen. It's just that the carbon footprint associated with that is different. So this is what differentiating those. And in that principle, the green hydrogen seems to hold more premium or higher value because of its impact to the environment. But it comes on the bit of a higher cost as well. So in Malaysia's situation, we have a lot of untapped energy potential or not fully utilized energy potential. This is the part that we want to correlate into the hydrogen production and also hydrogen economy. So some of the hydro that we have might have excess, that from time to time we have to release the water from the dam, for instance, and those energy can actually be harvested and you can use hydrogen as a storage for that. And then maybe during low usage time of the electricity generation, so again can be used. We also identified cases like excess water pressure in our piping system. So this can also being used on generating the hydrogen. So in terms of the economic value chain, we have to figure out all the parts of the value chain. In our case, is the manufacturing, storage of the hydrogen, transporting the hydrogen if necessary, and using the hydrogen. So this entire chain need to be looked at. As this excess energy potential that I mentioned earlier, you can imagine that it is kind of scattered. So the element of storage and transportation need to be there as well. That's why we have to look at it quite delicately and focus on this area before we can come up with a solution. But what I can say is like the potential is there. Now we're looking forward into unveiling this potential.
Thank you, Zaimi, and thank you also for pointing out the fact that in terms of this generation of surplus capacity, when perhaps the system, the grid is not able to absorb it in terms of demand, I think you pointed out an area where we definitely need to find a way to store or otherwise convert that energy into a form that can be used later. And as long as we don't have grid battery storage, hydrogen is clearly one of the ways to store that excess capacity when it is generated but not necessarily needed. So once again, the idea of the perhaps moving in parallel at the same time, looking at both hydrogen and EVs, moving next to Encik Naim, in terms of the EV vision for Malaysia, what does Mari see? How does Mari view the progress of EV adoption in Malaysia? When you look at the position of MITI versus the other industries, the entire ecosystem, would you be able to explain to us a little bit how Mari's vision can be made alive in Malaysia? Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Gary. So in terms of sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes, you cut out
okay,
for a
sorry,
moment.
because it's disconnected sometimes. All right. So for the question, what are the visions of Mari? Of course, Mari is one of the agency under MITI. And the reason that we are one of the agency is because of whatever that the decisions by MITI that need to do activities. So it's not just that the activities are subject to the national automotive policy, and the visions is that whatever that, for example, for cleaner environment, MITI has suggested that we move forwards to NAP 2020. And still, the visions of the NAP 2014 previously is for the clean environment. And NAP 2020, it's focused more on new technologies. It does in terms of the factory, smart manufacturing, in terms of the internets and IoT, in terms of autonomous vehicles. But we do not forget about the clean environment, which is still we do activities and our visions is to make the world cleaner. So that's why we have those programs. We do research activities still based on to reduce the carbon emissions. We have activities giving incentive towards vehicle manufacturers and also companies who is doing a great job in reducing carbon emissions. And we also heighten up those trainings, and we give trainings towards new technologies in order to reduce the carbon emissions, in order to increase the level of local talents. That's what I said. In terms of local talents, it's like we are doing in terms of lifting up their levels of information and knowledge in terms of new technologies. So the first, it's about policy from the government. And as the agency, we are the one who is moving towards the action. And one of also the action is to provide the testing facility that we have in National Emission Test Center, whereby we can do the testing up until Euro 60. And that is actually for everyone's information. If you would like to send the products to European Union, to Europe, for example, you can do the testing in NETC. That is how Mari has provide the updated most exhaust emission testing lab in ASEAN. So it's easier for companies, not just companies, but those vehicle manufacturers and other companies would increase their local talents and do their R&D inside Malaysia. So yes, Gary, that is the update.
Okay, thank you very much, Janai. Just a brief time check here. It is about now a quarter till noon, and we'll need to be wrapping up the forum for this morning pretty soon. But once again, thank you all for your questions. If you do have members of the audience, if you do have further questions, please once again feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If we cannot get to your questions, we'll try to respond to them in writing. If you direct your question to one or more of the panelists. But I would like to sort of combine the last few questions that we have here with the closing statements of each of the panelists. And if you'll be able to do that, and then we'll be able to get through these last few minutes before we get to something that I need to do before the closing, which is to run a survey of some kind, I believe. But firstly, going to Prof. Sawal, when you talk about active mobility, what we're talking about actually does require physical space. And where the space comes from, as you've shown us in some of your slides, sometimes the space is actually given up by the automotive lanes. And, you may go from a 4-lane two-direction dual carriageway to perhaps a single lane dual carriageway, and that frees up more space for other activities such as biking, walking, and the like. But I'd like to know if you have come across any cases where a city has successfully made a transition. In many cases, you really can't move buildings, so it's interesting if you've come across any situations where a country has successfully replaced roadway with sidewalk and bike paths in such a way that the local communities have actually become enriched by the experience. If people walk more, they tend to stop at more shops and these sorts of behaviors. But we'd be very pleased to hear your views on that. And then if you could immediately go to your take-home closing statement, if any, for our listeners this morning. Go ahead, Prof. Sawal.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Yeah, actually, you are right regarding the space needed for if you want to have more space for cyclists and also for those for the pedestrians. We need space, and if we are doing on the existing infrastructure, so obviously we will take space from the road. I mean, for the space for cars will be taken so that we can allocate some for these cyclists and also the pedestrian. Okay, so remember we need to also separate the walking paths and also the cycle paths, right? Okay, actually few countries, some countries they have done this. Okay, they have transformed, they have reduced the lanes for cars in order to accommodate for the cyclists and for the pedestrians. Okay, I believe that from my reading, cities like Copenhagen, even Seoul that I showed earlier, where they increase where they widen the walking path, okay, for the people to walk. And countries even in UK, they are also doing the same thing, right? So basically, what they are doing, they reduce the space for the cars and they accommodate space for the cyclists and the pedestrians. And Copenhagen is very successful story for this. Okay, as you know that I believe Copenhagen has the highest what we call the highest track for the cyclist track in the world. And other than that, if we are thinking about the new township development, okay, so we need to, from now onwards, when we want to develop a new township, for any new development, we need to think this as we need to include the cyclist and the pedestrian as the in the equations. Okay, don't build the city that prioritize the car. Okay, build the city as a walkable and a bikeable city. So in that way, so in the earliest development, okay, we can prepare the proper lane for cyclists, the proper lane for the walking paths, and also the lane for cars, right? And in some countries, they block the road for cars altogether. Okay, this is what I suggested earlier. For example, in one of the township in Sri Putra, every day actually I go to this town almost every day, almost daily, and every day I will face this kind of traffic. People, just say everyone is using the cars, and sometimes they just park, they do double park here and there, making the town even congested. Right? So I've been thinking, why can't I don't? It seems that in Malaysia we tend to park in front of the shop. We don't want to walk even for a short distance. If we can park inside the shop, we will park inside the shop, right? So I think, I don't know, for me, why not we can park a bit far, but then you walk to the shop rather than you just do a double park because you want to go to the shop. This is what I don't understand. So this is what I'm thinking. If we can change, I can see that in Sri Putra, we can do that actually. All these shop lots, we can block this shop lot from car going inside, making it totally just for walking and cycling, right? We can prepare some areas for the car to park. Okay, so everyone can park there, and then you just walk around. I think if you in some countries like in UK, this is quite popular. They call it high street. In high street, these people can just walk. No cars is allowed there, right? Then and if you go to any cities, you will have this high street. Okay, so I think we need to do that in Malaysia as well, because this is to encourage people to use this type of mobility more and more. So if you ask my final take on this, yeah, we have to start now. I hope that all the relevant stakeholders can work together. We need to start with one pilot. Okay, one pilot or one example or one proof of concept of these active mobility areas. So where we block the road for cars, we build the rooftop, okay, the covered area so that people can walk under the shade without sweating and so on. We prepare a lane for cycles, for the cyclists and the pedestrians, okay, and we prepare this bike sharing concept in that particular city or in that particular town. Okay, let's make it as what we call a proof of concept or pilot study, and we see how it goes from there. Right? This is my hope that we can start or we can do this now if possible. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Prof. Sawal. Going to you, Encik Uzami, once again, I'll give you a question, and then if you could, after that, move directly to your take-home thoughts that you'd like your audience to have this morning. Essentially, the question is, what are the targets for adoption of electric buses in Malaysia? I've been on some of the hybrid buses in Putrajaya, and I think once it was on an electric bus, but my experiences with those are few and far between. What can Malaysians expect in terms of the targets for adoption in the future? Perhaps not just electric buses, but for public transport modal share. What would you? What's your vision like for that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you again, Dr. Gary. As what I mentioned earlier as well during my session, so we are looking at the electric bus as a kind of like a double impact things in terms of like helping the environment, right? So one is shifting people to the public transport or to the bus rather than driving their own car with the average vehicle occupancy of 1.2% per vehicles in Malaysia. So you opt for the bus, and then further clean it up with the cleaner technology for the electric for the bus itself. So these are the kind of the principle that we are looking at in terms of this direction. In terms of the target, Malaysia, I think through several earlier policy that preceding the policy that we're working in, and also that's a reference for the policy that we're working on. is targeting about 40% of the public transport model share in Malaysia throughout the key cities in Malaysia. So right now where we are is about 20% in Klang Valley, and have to keep in mind that Klang Valley also have this train facility as well that a lot of other city does not have currently. So that also contributing into the higher public transport model share for Klang Valley. So we look into like what are the reason onto this lower model share on public transport, and is kind of like found that there are two contributors. One is the ridership itself. So people are not really motivated to go into the public transport in Malaysia for some reason, and we had conducted a survey, a detailed survey on trying to find out of the root cause of this scenario. So what we found is that most of the concern is on the time travel, which on the bus itself, you see it is part of the heavily congested road in Malaysia. So it worked together with the congestion, where else in different part of the world, the bus is being given priority on the road throughout maybe like the BRT system or intelligent traffic system or priority lanes, which is a bit lacking still for Malaysia. So in different part of the world, people are seeing bus as a more dependent modes, which they can reach to the destination faster than driving their own car and stuck in the traffic jam. So that is one of the key motivators. So we have to work on to like improving that scenario to improve the ridership uptake. The other part is the number of the buses itself. So there are recommendations coming from World Bank that every 100,000 population, you need about 50 buses. So we are seeing the numbers for Malaysia. It is quite low. For Klang Valley, we only have 19 compared to cities like Singapore have more than 100 buses per 100,000 populations. And we can see a huge difference in terms of the modal share of the public transport for us in Malaysia and also Singapore. So that is the one that we're looking at, and to kind of like combine these two elements, and based on the study, we are targeting to have about 10,000 electric bus on Malaysian road by 2030 cumulatively. So this is in terms of like the number of the buses itself need to be increased. At the same time that we want to also having a cleaner bus on the road. So that is the target. On the last part, on kind of like trying to conclude the session today for me, I think on the mobility side, what I could say is like if you can be mindful about the mode of the transport that we are embarking to on every journey, and if we can choose the better one than the other, that can be a good start for us. Of course, the active mobility is also one of the key focus for the low carbon mobility blueprint, and the industrialization of the electric vehicles also our focus as well. So we are working together with everybody on this one. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Zaini. And to our final panelist for today, Mr. Naim. I think that the question is very, very succinct. You mentioned the EV policy, but we actually haven't seen it yet. Do you have any sense of when the new EV policy will be available to the public so that we can take a good read of it and try to get the private sector to respond in the quickest possible way? And then right after that, perhaps your closing thoughts, anything you want to leave the audience with this morning. Mr. Naim?
So this is very hot topic right now. And yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you now.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I have to turn off the video. The connection is unstable. So thank you very much for the question. It is very hot topic right now. So it is very hot right now for the EV policy. So it is very hot topic for the EV policy right now. And just to get a brief information about the EV policy, the objective is actually to accelerate the EV and its technology adoption in Malaysia. Of course, whenever that we have a new policy, it's to work with stakeholders in providing the adequate EV infrastructure, like charging facilities. And the third one is actually to support the industry development as a whole. Of course, that is including the manufacturing, assembly, sales, aftermarket services, and others. So the question by Dr. Gary is, when will be the EV policy announced? I can update you that the policy is actually at the final stage of deliberation, and that is after we have provided to each of the ministry in terms of for the ministry to comment. And at this particular stage right now, it is waiting for the cabinet's approval. So mostly we have done the engagement with industry at the first stage, and the industry has given the advice or information towards the EV policy. And after that, we sent those draft to each of the ministries for them to comment and to give advice or any additional information. So at this particular stage, it's actually waiting for the cabinet's approval, and it will soon be announced, Dr. Gary. So that one is from me.
Okay. Any closing words that you would like to leave our audience with?
All right. So as you guys know, National Automotive Policy 2020 is for now it has been more than a year, and currently Mari through MITI is working across all ministries to provide inputs to strengthen the regulatory framework. And among of all the works, including standards development, policy recommendations, we benchmark those global trends as well as we reflect those to balance the industry readiness. So of course, if would be my vision, it would be in terms of whatever that Mari is having, which if there is any companies who would like to collaborate or have new technologies that is for the cleaner environment, and we can work between ministries and agencies in order to get the better and cleaner environment. So I think that is all from me, Dr. Gary.
Thank you very much, Encik Naim. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of the second of the TRAC forums in this IGEM 2021 session. We thank you for your questions. We thank you for your participation with us this morning. And we invite you to continue to look at IGEM's schedule to find more of these sorts of programs that will be of interest to you, so that you can participate in them as well. But before I close, I do need to on behalf of MGTC, our IGEM Secretariat, as well as the organizers, extend a very, very warm note of thanks to our esteemed panelists this morning, Dr. Sawal Hamid Muhammad Ali, who spoke with us about active mobility, and Sheikh Huzaimi Noor Omar, who was talking to us about some of the issues related to low carbon energy for mobility, and of course, Encik Naim, who very ably represented Dato' Madani this morning in talking about Mari's initiatives. So before I close this session, I'd like to do one last thing, and that is to inform you, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, that there is a survey that is going to be sent out, and I'm going to move to a separate screen here and click the email survey. We, of course, very much would like to know your feedback on this presentation, this event, and any other of the events under IGEM. And so kindly take a few moments to fill in this survey and return it. I think it will return to us. So I'm clicking the blast survey email. And I believe the Secretariat will be able to confirm that it has indeed gone out. So with that, once again, a very big thank you to our esteemed panelists, a big thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and of course, not forgetting all the support individuals behind the scenes working very hard to bring you this second TRAC forum, Transformation, Revolution, Action and Commitment on low carbon mobility and clean energy for low carbon mobility under IGEM 2021. Good afternoon and have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.